One of US golf's greatest failings has been its recent performances in the Ryder Cup, the team match play event which pits the US against Europe every other year. Since 1995, the US has won 3 Ryder Cups and lost 9. They haven't won in Europe in 25 years, going 0-6, while the Europeans have won half of the 6 cups held on US soil in the same time span. What makes this strange is that on paper, the United States seems to have the more talented players in almost every one of these events. It has more players high in the world golf rankings than any other country, or continent for that matter, and it leads Europe in major tournament wins in every decade starting in the 1920s. Even stranger, the US plays these match play team events twice as often as the Europeans do, facing the rest of the world in the President's Cup on odd years when the Ryder Cup isn't held, and has dominated that event with a 10-1-1 record over its history. US dominance seems unsurprising in the President's Cup, and you can come up with a lot of intuitive reasons why. The US are united by a common language, are representing a single country rather than a nebulous region, have a better level of talent, at least according to available numbers, and go through this process twice as often as their opponents. Their success makes sense. But all of these things are also true for the Ryder Cup, and yet the results are dramatically different. So what gives? While it's hard to find anything solid, there are several factors that might contribute to the US struggles. Jet lag is something players from both countries have to deal with, but European players probably spend more time bouncing back and forth across the Atlantic and learning to adjust to different time zones. Plus, if jet lag really has an effect, it stands to reason that US players, while traveling east to play in Europe, would have a significantly larger disadvantage than when European players travel west to play in the US, since losing time is generally harder on your body than gaining it. At the risk of reading too much into this, the results match that theory really well. Europe may also have an advantage when it comes to the courses the Ryder Cup is played on, or more specifically, familiarity with the courses. Prior to this year's Ryder Cup, for instance, every member of Europe's team had played on Le Golf National, this year's course, whereas only half the Americans had. On the other hand, all of the last 6 US-hosted cups were at courses that had previously hosted majors, and were therefore well known to a large number of European players. One of the confusing things about the US's failure is that you'd expect them to be a more cohesive group than the European team. You'd think that the US would have the patriotic edge, since US players are playing for their country while the European players are playing for their continent, I guess? The notion that patriotism should improve performance is so ingrained in us that some people have speculated that the US's lackluster performances indicate that the US players don't care enough about the event. But I wonder if the opposite is true. Maybe they do care a lot, and it actually hurts them. I was watching the body language of the US players this past week. Every mistake seemed like a huge disappointment. These are professional golfers. They've played a lot of golf. Every single one of them has had a bad day on the course, and they all know how to bounce back from a poor shot. They usually don't hang their heads quite as fast as this. Golf is usually a solo sport, but in the Ryder Cup, every mistake feels like you're letting down your team, or maybe even your country. Now add to that a string of failures by the US, and no pressure, right? And if you don't think pressure is a big deal in golf, just look at the number of players who have choked while leading on the last day of a major. The Europeans, on the other hand, don't have quite the same pressure. They're representing something, of course, but they aren't bearing the weight of their own nation to quite the same degree. And that pressure is relieved even more by their string of recent successes. The Europeans are better than they're given credit for. I mentioned the world golf rankings and the number of majors won by US players as evidence of US dominance, but it's very possible that the numbers are just misleading. It's difficult to evaluate golfers fairly, and if any players are going to be overlooked, it would probably be those who don't play as regularly on the American PGA Tour. Players like Thorbjorn Olesen, Tyrrell Hatton, and Alex Noren on this year's World Cup team. Apologies if I mispronounce any of their names. None of whom have won a PGA tournament, all of whom rank relatively low in the world golf rankings, and yet all 3 earned their way onto the European team without needing to be a captain's pick. Meanwhile, every player on this year's US team is currently more highly ranked than the 3 European players I just mentioned, and has won on the PGA Tour. A lot of good all that did. By the way, if you're starting to doubt the accuracy of the world golf rankings, well, other common measurements tend to be even more America-centric. Are you sensing a pattern here? Team match play is just plain weird, a sport so different from normal golf that it's impossible to use stroke play results to predict who will thrive and who will struggle in a team match play environment. Bizarrely, when you look at the average world golf ranking for each team in each Ryder Cup, the team with the lower average ranking has won 10 out of the last 12 times, which has to be nothing more than a statistical anomaly, but it illustrates that there is no obvious correlation between world golf ranking and individual performance in the Ryder Cup. While you can try to explain Ryder Cup results using things like the course, the location, or the players, there's one more incredibly unsatisfying answer that we have to acknowledge: pure dumb luck. Even more than other sports, golf is a hugely psychological game, and seemingly arbitrary momentum shifts can play a huge part in these events. Beyond that, Ryder Cups have often been decided by only a handful of swings. Of Europe's 9 most recent victories, 4 of them were decided by a 1-point margin, meaning that among the almost 500 holes and nearly 2,000 strokes taken in each event, 2 strokes gained or lost at strategic moments, 2 could have reversed the outcome each time. Flip those 4 results, and suddenly the US performance starts to look way better. The real answer is probably some combination of all these things, as well as a bunch of other factors I've neglected, like pairing strategies, the pod system, egos, playing styles, camaraderie or lack thereof, and so on. But whatever the answer is, American golf finds itself in an all too familiar situation, once again facing the mystery of why the US keeps losing the Ryder Cup.